Well, we also have a canary in the coal mine about our education system because one TikToker is speaking out that things are just not going great. Hannah, let's take a look at that TikTok.
Let's take a moment to unpack. So I'm not really understanding why they're not telling y'all. Like, we all know that the world is behind, like, globally, like, because of the pandemic and stuff. But I don't understand why they're not stressing to y'all how bad it is. Like, I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are... I'm going to just say this. I teach 7th grade. They are still performing on the 4th grade level. I don't care how you flip it, turn it, swing it, swindle it. They still performing on the 4th grade level. Ain't nobody talking about how they just keep moving, passing them on. They just keep passing them on, 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 passing them on. I can put as many zeros in this grade book as I want to. They're gonna move that child to the 8th grade next year. Ain't nobody talking about that. Why they not talking about that? Why they not telling y'all that y'all... And why don't y'all know that y'all kids not performing on their grade level? Why y'all don't know this? Why y'all don't know? Talk about it. Let's unpack. Because y'all be quick to talk about, oh, the teacher this, the teacher this, it's your job, baby. I just got here 30 days ago. She was performing on the 4th grade level since 4th grade.
So, Brad, this video has gone viral not only on TikTok, but also on Twitter. And one of the reasons it's going viral is not just because of the content, it's because so many other teachers are stitching it. That's how you basically, guys, if you're not TikTok, you can take a video and respond to it essentially. So many other teachers are stitching this with their own experiences and validating what he is experiencing. Anecdotally, my sister-in-law is a teacher at a private school in Alabama. She told me the exact same thing last week, that the kids just get worse and worse each year as far as where they're at. And she teaches 1st grade. So we're talking really young kids developmentally, and it just gets worse and worse since the pandemic. But this year, she said, is the worst by far. They're just not coming in with the basic skill sets or abilities that you would expect kids to be at their grade levels. And this is something that was so predictable and predicted throughout the pandemic as the teachers unions and Fauci and co were working to shut down schools needlessly. There were many, many people, us included, who consistently said this is, one, not worth it. There's not a serious threat to kids in these schools. But secondarily, the amount that you are going to put kids behind if you do this is going to be significant. It's going to be felt for decades in this country. And it is, of course, going to hurt kids who are already living on the margins the most. And the data is in, this is this guy's experience. He teaches public schools in Atlanta, it appears, based on the TikTok. But I found some national data. They say that math, reading, and history scores from the past 3 years show that students learned far less during the pandemic than was typical. And by the spring of 2022, the average student was half a year behind in math and a third of a year behind in reading. The detailed geographic data revealed what national tests do not, which is that the pandemic exacerbated economic and racial educational inequality. They found that the pandemic left students in low-income and predominantly minority communities even further behind their peers and richer, whiter districts than they were before, and it was already pretty bad before. And lastly, they say in the hardest hit communities where students fell behind by more than 1.5 years in math, schools would have to teach 150% of a typical year's worth of material for 3 years in a row just to catch up. This is dire. These are people that we need to be able to come out and be doctors and nurses and engineers, and we are not going to have the workforce that we need in very short order if something doesn't happen to rectify this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I will just say, to dispense with the euphemisms a little bit, it's not really the pandemic that did this. Although when people say the pandemic, they're referring to policies as well. But I just want to be crystal clear. There's nothing about COVID existing or spreading that made kids inherently need to fall behind in schools. In some European countries, they never closed schools, or they closed them only briefly and then reopened them. Some Catholic private schools never closed during the pandemic, and you can look and their data just didn't change. Whereas what we're going to see now in every graph of education data is a huge divot. And maybe it will go back up, or maybe it will flatline and be at just a decreased norm now. But you're going to see 2020 and 2021, that data just starkly diverge, because you can't take kids out of school for, in some places, a year and a half, or go to this remote education that was a complete disaster, and then not expected to have lifelong ramifications. McKinsey has done analysis about this, how this will impact kids' lifetime earnings, and you're talking huge amounts of money that they will not earn over their lifetimes from less academic achievement. But I think just honestly, I don't blame people too much who initially closed schools in like spring, summer 2020, right? Because a lot of unknowns were there. And so the idea that they were scared, they were being cautious, they didn't know if schools would be big vectors for transmission and they'd go home and get their grandpa sick and kill them. It turned out very quickly, though, after those few months, we could look at European schools that didn't close and we could see, okay, they're not big vectors. It's not an issue. And yet the entire next school year, and then a little bit even into the school year that followed that, throughout 2021, tons of schools across the country were closed, or they had like hybrid or remote or other things. And it just was never really well substantiated by any sort of public health or scientific analysis. It was always mostly rooted in fear and the teachers' unions lobbying heavily against reopening, fighting tooth and nail to not have to go back to work and do their jobs. When to me, that was always crazy. We expected the people stocking the grocery stores to keep going to work. They were essential workers. Well, teachers are essential workers. And I would have been happy to see us make accommodations for teachers who like have an autoimmune disease or are really old or like are for some reason particularly vulnerable. But just by and large, they abdicated their duty. Local governments and school boards and teachers unions and everyone else that did this, they failed our kids. And there's going to be lifelong ramifications from it. And it's really, really disheartening. I feel bad for the teachers who are in schools who have these students who are so far behind. Because, like this random teacher, I'm sure, wasn't involved in the decision to open or close schools, but he's dealing with the consequences, which is his students are 3 years behind.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it is important to remember, too, unions shut down the schools for reasons that had a lot less to do with the pandemic and a lot more to do with their political grab bag. We had unions that were trying to keep schools shut down so they could get things like defund the police passed, or they could get universal health care in their state. I mean, there was
Yeah, guys, that sounds made up. That's a real thing. They literally had demands that included Medicare for all and defund the police, some of these teachers' unions. That sounds like it's like a Breitbart story that's not real or something. It's 100% real.
It's facts. You can look it up. But it was atrocious what they did. It was corrupt. It was disgusting. And again, kids are going to be the ones that pay the price for this. I do appreciate what this teacher said, though, about how we're so quick to blame the teachers. Even parents are quick to blame the teachers. And this is a problem I have with the public school system. I think it, to some people, to some families, sort of says you don't have to be involved in your education of your child. You can just hand them off to the government and everything will be great. No, it won't. You need to be involved in your kids' education no matter where they're in school, but especially if they're in public school. You need to be paying attention to what they're being taught. You need to be countering a good bit of what they're being taught. And you should be engaged enough in your kids' educational progress to know if they are not keeping up by grade. I mean, the fact that he's saying they're just rolling these kids over from one grade to the next, even if they have terrible grades. My mom taught in the public school system for a couple of years, and she had a terrible experience with it and experienced this where essentially they were telling her she had to give kids good enough grades to pass them, good enough grades for them to play sports. And she was aghast at that. She really was there to educate and wanted to do the right thing. And she ultimately quit over it. She had the financial position to be able to do that. A lot of teachers don't. And so they are being told to participate in this kind of really corrupt system. There's things like No Kid Left Behind, which was a terrible education package passed under George W. Bush that are responsible for some of these policies, and essentially saying that schools, it hurts their funding if they have a certain amount of kids that are not moving up grade by grade. So instead of that actually meaning that they do a better job of educating the kids, they just keep rolling them up, even if they're illiterate. And so you end up with this system where Americans are graduating high school and they are on third grade reading levels. It's atrocious. You can't have a sustainable country with people that lack these fundamental educational foundations. And I mean, guys, there are some that are going to say this is a money issue. This is why we need to fund the schools better. Cut the crap. They got $190 billion extra dollars during COVID. They were already spending $15,000 per kid per year on average, meaning some districts are spending far more than that even before the pandemic. That is double the cost of most private schools down here in the South. And yet we are still getting this crud. It is inexcusable. It is not a funding problem. The government is not capable, I think, of running schools in a way that is going to produce the outcomes that we need. And this is why school choice is imperative. We've got to get these kids out of these failing schools and give them a shot to catch up. And parents have got to become more involved. You have to be doing your due diligence on this. It's not fair to expect a teacher within 1 year to be able to come in and do all this catch up and rectify all of these things in your kids' progression.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really not about funding. So I want to read you a couple of shocking statistics. This is about Baltimore now in Maryland. Quote, at Baltimore's 5 best high schools, 11% of students were proficient in math at the 5 best high schools. And now, this is not a funding issue because Baltimore schools are the 4th most funded large school system in America. I mean, if that doesn't tell you we need systemic change in the education system, I don't know what will. If we have testimonies like this from teachers, we have hard data, we have the solutions that progressives advocate for clearly not working. I mean, I don't know. If you don't support school choice after this, what do we have to lose, really, by trying to give people more options? What do we have to lose? The status quo is completely untenable.